When developers started building a new housing development near Scarborough, they were shocked to find the Romans had beaten them to it. Excavations unearthed a villa, which experts say is the most significant find of the last decade.
Archaeologists excavating a site in Scarborough discovered something so unusual that even seasoned archaeologists temporarily ceased comparisons. Such a discovery ranks amongst Britain's most pivotal Roman ruin excavations in a span of several decades. The location is laid out in such detail that scholars believe it might be a revolutionary, first-of-its-kind structure within the entire former Roman Empire combined.
We have a series of Roman buildings that have been enlarged and added to over time.
It does not fit neatly into any defined category, be it a villa, temple, or fort. After unearthing the entire site, a surprise discovery emerged that few archaeologists had envisioned. What archaeologists chose to do with this newfound information came with a surprise twist. But before that wall revealed its purpose, one question haunted the dig team. Why was something this precise so hidden here? The moment everything changed. Let's walk through how it actually happened. The discovery didn't creep in. It exploded into view. Think about your quintessential construction site just outside Scarborough. The hum of diesel, surveyors yelling out numbers, and dirt that looks like every other future housing plot. Then a digger bucket snaps into a line of stone the crew didn't see coming. A second pass shows a curve, then a doorway. The crew freezes. In seconds, the ordinary job becomes a deliberate, controlled dig. That was the moment when everything changed. The sort one does not anticipate. When the archaeologists pulled out what was to be one of Britain's biggest Roman discoveries. No prelude, no gradual build-up. The first fragment of a wall came out, and straight away, experts realized the layout was purposeful. The stonework was too fine. You don't lay your hands on such symmetry by accident, and you definitely don't find it on land slated for farmland history alone. Teams sprang into action. Grid lines snapped into place. Every grain of soil felt like a potential clue. It was like the ground was just waiting for someone finally to notice, one researcher would later say. That isn't hyperbole. That's the raw reality of what was unfolding right beneath everyone's feet. It wasn't just a question of scale. It was a question of form. They found a curved building, which didn't conform to the standard Roman countryside plan. A room whose shape wasn't the expected rectangle. Then the rooms nearby suggested underfloor heating. Then another wing. With every fresh find, the conversation moved from "this is larger than a villa" to "this is another thing altogether." Imagine the pressure at that instant in time. Timelines, budgets, and development plans tossed out the window the moment a person realizes they are standing atop something that could rewrite regional archaeology. The site manager who called in the specialists likely was expecting a quick clearance in a day or two. Instead, what they found turned a routine site survey into a months-long excavation that grabbed headlines nationwide. The crew knew they were dealing with a statement piece. Whoever built it didn't intend for it to blend in. Yet the biggest questions weren't answered that day, nor would they be close. Because when the full structure began to map out, one thing was for certain: the pattern didn't align with anything in Britain. And that's where things got really tangled. But as archaeologists traced its full footprint, a stranger truth emerged. Why would Roman builders abandon every familiar rule here? The architecture that broke the rules. Currently, we have to examine what made this arrangement so exceptional. Because once the complete outline had been traced by experts, the talks that originated from curiosity turned to disbelief. Start with the centerpiece. Circular room, no curve in the bathhouse, no rounded corner of the building, but the actual centerpiece is a circular room that holds the whole complex together. In fact, the use of such a shape would have been quite unusual in elite construction in Roman Britain. Next is the Romans' engineering skill. Roman engineering and architectural skills are renowned, is my text's paraphrasing of what the inscription says. Then pocket spaces, radiating rooms from a central center like spokes from a wheel, designed with purpose, not intuition. You wouldn't plan something like that spontaneously. That was engineered. Then came the attached bath suite, and this was no rural equivalent. The craftsmanship was precise. The heating pipes in the hypocaust indicated heated floors. The quality of the craftsmanship suggested expert craftsmen, the sort that only wealthy sponsors could afford to hire. Bath suites are not merely functional spaces, they are statements of status. The individuals responsible for the building wished to demonstrate their status to those granted admittance. Nevertheless, despite all the clues, the building did not fall into place within a recognizable genre. Roman villas in Britain all had identifiable layouts, rectangles, and wings, and courtyards and corridors, while temples followed their own recognizable designs. This combination did not. When historic England assessed the evidence, the verdict was clear. We know of nothing else quite like it. What, if anything, does that mean? As an archaeologist, you discover a place with no familiar pattern. It is as if you have discovered a book with a language that is brand new. As was stated by one scholar, the architect had access to all the typical clever Roman methods, yet chose to break the rules. The important thing here is this: it wasn't an error, it was deliberate. And here's what you need to remember. The shape of this building indicates controlled access. This wasn't made for the general public. It wasn't a public bathhouse. It funnels you towards a small group of people who came here and met or did something particular. Not necessarily religious or political, but it is exclusive. The circular shape creates a focus, which pulls everybody towards the center. Compared to the typical Roman architecture that sees status as being far away from the door, this one throws everybody the same distance away from the center. That is a powerful statement. The person behind this architectural design has tremendous knowledge of typical Roman architecture to abandon it to this extent. The silent ending. Now, when the structural layout was established, the teams began the process of soil readings. That's where the image usually comes into focus. Domestic sites will create a pattern of lost tools, smashed ceramics, trash, coins dropped in doorways, repairs, fire damage, and general disarray. Ritual sites, military sites, and others will create a unique pattern, of course. But when the team of experts began to dig into the soil evidence at Scarborough, it was the absence of evidence that led off. The first evidence found, and the first evidence that told a story, that of a lack of the usual debris you find in a high-status Roman structure. Let's be clear, though, that it was not uninhabited. They found ceramic evidence, tile, coins, and structural components, enough to show active use. That's the important point, though, because the pattern they found was anything but typical of a long-term, messy use of the structure. That was, in fact, a tidy pattern, a controlled pattern, a pattern almost to the point of appearing curated. An archaeologist described this phenomenon as a site that seemed to be closed down, not destroyed. That, of course, was a crucial distinction to make. And the questions to ask, of course, then revolve around the fact that when a structure collapses, as in the case of fire, invasion, or structural failure, then the debris will show a pattern of disorder in the soil, a layering that's mixed, pockets of burning, and debris collapsed in the wrong order. That's not what they saw, of course. What the team saw of the Scarborough complex was a tidy pattern, the pattern of a structure that was cleaned out, picked over for its valuable components, and then walked away from in a deliberate, non-emergency, non-disaster pattern. Who does that, of course, and why will they, by definition, take pieces of a structure, like a structural member, and then leave a floor layout in place? The soil tells a different pattern, the pattern of a deliberate exit strategy. You start seeing intent everywhere, a researcher said, and the point of the observation, of course, we will get to in a moment. That observation, the observation of intent, of course, must necessarily resonate because of its apt description of the team's own observations of the soil evidence at the Scarborough complex. The team, of course, found nothing in the way of soil evidence to show the destruction of the structure or the collapse of the structure. That, of course, suggests necessarily that the structure was not left to collapse, was not left to deteriorate, and was not used in the usual chaotic pattern of transformation to a different use. No, instead, it was methodically dismantled, piece by piece, piece by piece, piece by piece, and then, of course, walked away from in a pattern that was anything but an emergency. You are looking at soil that indicates people took the time to dispose of it well, but not well enough to leave behind a written statement on what that was about. There is obviously the question of what this complex was doing here if it was so well run. Scarborough was not exactly the center of Roman Britain, but it was not out of the way either. So, if Scarborough fits Rome's defensive machine perfectly, why would a nearby complex be deliberately, yet built differently, purposefully? Rome's quiet northern power base. Now, let's set some context, because if you don't understand Roman Yorkshire, you have no idea what's at stake. Yorkshire was no isolated border. It was a military, logistical, and economic system that had at its heart the strength of Iberacum, that is, modern-day York. There was no local center. That was an imperial HQ where emperors died, soldiers cycled through, and power was exercised over the north. In that center were scores of satellite facilities, roadways built for mobility, forts built for control, and coastal facilities built for watching anyone trying to get through before they could reach Roman jurisdiction. Scarborough was part of that infrastructure, but it was no passive part. That headland was home to one of the most significant Roman signaling facilities on the East Coast, built specifically for watching and warning, keeping the route of supply safe. That was no theoretical necessity. Its ruins still exist beneath Scarborough Castle today. Filey, Hunmanby, Ravenscar, every town on that coast had a part in a sequence of facilities that would catch warning of troubles before they reached the settled center. So that's twist number one. This newly discovered site is no such facility, not even remotely similar. That was a strategy and utility built strictly for surveillance. What was found at Eastfield was evidence of sophistication, heated floors, symmetry, and a level of skill that pointed to riches, not refuge. When that was pitted against similar facilities, there was an instant mismatch. It shouldn't be here this way, one researcher bluntly pointed out. That was no critique. That was a shock reaction. This Scarborough site is no border site directly accessing a key road. It is no ridge site built atop a high point that was naturally defensible. It is no agricultural site situated within territory that was apt for a typical country villa. Instead, it lies demonstrably between these nodes, close enough to matter, but far enough away to distinguish it. Think about this. Think about this meaning. Military sites make practicality. High ground, lines of sight, road access. Rich people's villas make a different practicality. Good soil, good views, good trade routes. This site confounds both. It is as if unearthing a luxury spa is finding it midway between a military post and nowhere at all. The very fact indicates that those who designed this could completely defy the normal conventions of Roman city planning. Anomalies never go unnoticed in archaeology. When something breaks a pattern, it is because the pattern is only partial. And if the Scarborough discovery is the odd one out regarding Roman Yorkshire, it means there is a reason hitherto unknown to experts. And this reason must be well connected to those who wielded power to design it. But before identifying the reason for this structure, it is essential to understand the wider ramifications of such discoveries within Roman Yorkshire. The truth is, there is more than one such spot where the legacy of the Roman Empire still exists. But what if this anomaly isn't isolated, and the Yorkshire coast hides a coordinated Roman strategy yet to be uncovered? The coastal puzzle. The Eastfield complex is unlike anything discovered in the Roman Empire and is completely separate from the town of Scarborough. Scarborough Castle is one of the most ideal locations for a signal station in Britain, whereas Eastfield is located further away from Scarborough and has a different style of architecture. The two forts that are located inland, Cawthorne and Lease Riggs, are proof of the way that Rome used to test their military ideas, but nothing comes close to what is offered by Eastfield. Villas built by the Romans as monuments of wealth and economic power typically fall within certain predictable patterns. This means that there is a need to have the landscape of Yorkshire during the Roman period completely reevaluated, especially given that the Eastfield complex has provided archaeologists with something they have never known before in Roman Britain and has led to an unexpected level of determination among archaeologists. The vanishing villa. This is an area in which people become confused about the future course of action because they assume that after the work was completed, the next logical step is to begin a preservation effort so that future generations can see and learn from what they had found, and a museum, or perhaps even an entire national effort to promote this heritage. But the reality is that the opposite happened. After much thought and deliberation, a decision was reached that the entire area will not only be reburied, but it will be done so in a responsible manner. To say that was a little confusing is probably an understatement. The most important thing to understand here is that the find in question, which is potentially the first of its kind in the former Roman Empire, left archaeology and history experts stunned. It was a find that was highly publicized in the media throughout England. However, instead of using this to promote tourism, provide public access to the site through a visitors center, and build an excavation site to promote awareness of Roman history in England, the only option to preserve the find was to bury it in a protective manner. Historic England, the council, and the developers all reached the same conclusion: that the only way to protect the find is to bury it under a landscaped open space. And this is where most people seem to get tripped up. This was not a failure. This is not a shortcut. This is what everyone decided was in the very best long-term interest of preserving the site itself, where exposure is a bad word in preservation circles, and weather damage to masonry is a constant danger. Vandalism becomes a likelihood, and maintenance becomes even more expensive, foot traffic further hastening its decay. Yet, the ripple effects are undeniable. Britain's most important Roman ruins sounds like something you'd imagine walking among, to walk alongside its walls and stand inside its rooms. Instead, the only way to properly safeguard the very thing that made the site special in the first place involved placing it all back underneath the ground. This is what one of the Historic England officers said regarding the burial. "Reburial isn't erasing history. It's safeguarding history until we can do more." This is a very rational statement, although the truth of the pain involved becomes much more evident when trying to imagine what the moment itself might have felt like. This could be the archaeological excavation crew that had spent months unearthing something very special in the Roman history of this area, now tasked with putting that very same history back underneath the ground, knowing that the public could never lay eyes on it themselves. Imagine standing at the edge of the excavation site itself on the last day of excavations. You understand what's underneath your feet, and you realize that once the earth is put back on top of the site, the world will just get the site through scans and reports. Again, the site is mute. It goes quiet once more, as it did all those years ago when the original owners abandoned it. That's the angle of the news headline. You won't believe what they have discovered, and you won't believe what they have had to do to preserve it. Now, the questions get bigger. Is this a change in global philosophy regarding ancient finds? Because what is happening in Scarborough is not happening in isolation. The global choice. Once buried deep in earth, Scarborough transitioned from being a local find to a worldwide problem. Burying artifacts is not only a contemporary practice, but is also practiced in Great Britain as part of worldwide conservation. When an artifact has either a high cost of maintaining preservation or is too fragile to be physically displayed, specialists make the tough decision to bury the site. Chaco culture in New Mexico and Laetoli in Tanzania illustrate this. UK policy acknowledges the frustration of the public when it comes to preserving excavated artifacts, as experts are faced with making the decision to preserve or not. A commonality shared with Scarborough and other previously mentioned examples is that through burial, the risk of loss due to public exposure increases exponentially. Moreover, many experts believe Scarborough is the most important archaeological site ever to be discovered, due to its exceedingly fragile structure. If masonry were left exposed, it would see or be subjected to moisture, frost, acts of vandalism, and automobile traffic within months of being unearthed. Burying preserves Scarborough. Burial also provides protection through limitations. It protects the archaeological site and denies public access to the site for educational purposes. Although experts differ in their views on excavating Scarborough and the limitation of education due to the burial of the site, both are right. Scarborough provides the opportunity for us to examine the relationship between the preservation of history and the trade-off of education. When we hide something with significance, what else may have been hidden over time for the sake of preservation? And what will we do when future technology allows us to learn about our history without the need to disturb archaeological sites? Thank you for watching this video to the end. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section down below and make sure to subscribe. Bye.